Hey, my peoples. Hey, my peoples. Hey, everybody. We are live. Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for you and me, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh! Hey, yeah, 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 yeah. No more being shy, no more staying in the middle. Yeah. We are the ones we've been waiting for, yeah. No more living small, no more giving just a little. No more being shy, no more staying in the middle. We about to take flight, so you better hold on. Flying through the night, put your night vision on. With the eye of the eagle, the heart of a lion, the wings of an angel to keep me flying. Light as a feather, cause I smile every day. The love in my heart, I give it away. Places we will go, things that we will see. Heaven only knows all that we will be. See the magic that you have. If you only knew who you really are, the things that you could do, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, hey, yeah, yeah, hey, yeah, yeah, hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Mother, Father, God, ancestors, spirit guides, guardian angels, all forces of light and love, we give thanks for you. We give thanks for life. We give thanks for breath. We thank you for coming to us and through us right here, right now, in this hour, that some would call the best of times and others would call the worst of times. And what we know is that we are right on time. What we know is that we were built for this moment. It is a time for love. It is a time for freedom and liberation and truth. It is a time for courage. It is a time to be brave. Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Let the God in you lead the way right now. It is time for us to lean into compassion, to reconnect to our humanity. We must match the frequency of light. We must match the vibration of love, because that frequency will inform everything we do now. We get to become the frequency. There's a powerful shift happening on the planet right now. Can you feel it? We are a part of it. We get to lean in and surrender to this wave of change and transformation, because it is happening right now. You dig? It's happening right here and right now. We get to lean in. We get to be brave. My name is Ayanna and Gregory. And I'm one of 11 children born to the late, great Dick Gregory. And my mother, who is still on this side, Lillian Gregory, who just celebrated her 86th birthday. Both freedom fighters. Both warriors for justice and love. Today I am inviting my younger brother, Yohance, Maqubela, to sit with me and to share some powerful information and energy and connections, so we can help understand how everything that's happening on the planet right now is connected, so we can understand how to arm ourselves spiritually, physically, emotionally, so we can be a part of the shift, the change, the dawning of a new day, because racism, white supremacy, imperialism, colonialism, settler colonialism, whatever you want to call these entities that have wreaked havoc on the planet, they're dying. This is their last play. They're going out kicking and screaming, and we are seeing it. Folks are rising up all over the world. And the young people, they ain't having it because they know the truth, and you can't lie to them. And so it is a time, like I said, for us to be brave and to not lose sight of our humanity, because that's what the powers that be, and I put powers in quotes, you know, we said the powers at the top because they really on the bottom now. And all that man has built is falling down. All that those quote unquote powerful white men have built, the co-creators of these systems that we're talking about, is falling down. Humpty Dumpty is falling and can never be put back together again. So I'm going to invite my brother at this time to join me and to join us. And we have some things to share and just some love to give. We are, like I said, we are the two youngest children of Lillian and Dick Gregory. And so I think it's also important for us to share the ways in which being the children of two powerful freedom fighters have informed who we are and what we do, and why it is important now to continue to exist on that continuum of liberation and light and love. And so, hey, yo.
Hey, sis.
Thanks for being here. And just, yeah, he's not on social media. He don't have no social media, so this is incredible. This is something that we've never done, and hopefully this moment will etch in stone the possibility or the certainty even of a podcast, because we're on the phone all the time, and there's so many things that he shares, so many things that he, not just the information he has, but the way he synthesizes it and the way that he leads with love, that I feel is important for the world to hear. And so I'm just going to stop right there and just let you jump in.
Well, thanks for having me, Ayanna. You know, it's interesting because everything that you said and how you started off is exactly where we need to be. Completely grounded and centered in spirit, our ancestors. So thank you for that invocation, but definitely give thanks and praise to the Creator and our ancestors for allowing us to be here right now, for allowing whoever this is reaching, whenever it is reaching you, to be touching you at that moment in time, because we know it is divinely aligned. You know, the great professor, called the professor of the world, professor of the people, personal friend of ours, Dr. Greg Kamathi Carr. Every time I see him, it always comes up, but he says the ancestors are always on time. And no matter what we're dealing with, whether it's our highs or what we perceive to be our lows, we have to remember that the ancestors are always on time. So I'm excited to be here. I know, like you said, this is a new platform for me. I do a lot of public speaking, interviews, this, that, whatever. But the social media piece is so. Bear with me, y'all. Bear with me. And as I've said a number of times when I filled in for my dad when he was alive, and I'll say definitely sitting next to this powerhouse, I am not the entertainer that neither my father or my sister is. So bear with me there as well.
So we started off acknowledging the Creator, the ancestors, the God that lives in us. And what we say is that with all the information that he's going to talk about and that I'm going to talk about, even beyond the information in our understanding of history, we get to lean into our natural God-given sensibility. So we thank you to the Creator, the ancestors. We ask that you continue to move through us, order our steps, and protect us, guide us, and allow us to be the change that we have been waiting for. And so we just say thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen, amen, and ashe. So we're going to, you want to talk about,
Yeah.
obviously we're going to talk about a few things, and he's going to start. You want to just jump
So
into
one of the things that Ayanna and I were talking about in wanting to do this, I mean, Ayanna and I, in addition to being, and anybody who's have siblings or have children, know that I don't care how you've raised your family, how close-knit, whatever, just because people are related doesn't necessarily mean that they see things eye to eye, particularly as they become an adult. Ayanna is probably the one person on this planet who thinks the most like me. And so whether it's something, like this that we're talking about with white supremacy and colonialism, or just a glance on the street that we'll both die cracking up laughing about, that similarity that's there. And so when we were talking about this, just, I know Ayanna's much more prevalent in this space, and wanting us to have conversations that we normally have amongst ourselves on this platform. One of the things that I mentioned just last night was, even though we're saying that we're Dick Gregory's children, and for those who know me, when my dad was alive, most people didn't even know that he was my father, just because that was never something I led with, and most of us led with, our father raised us to do the work. And we're going to talk about that a little more, but literally, we were, for those who just know Dick Gregory as an entertainer, or those who know him as a human rights activist, know that what you saw was a fraction. He lived his life saturated in the work of fighting for humanity. And that's what I was lactated on, right? And so, the celebrity piece didn't really tap into a great deal. But as we were talking last night, because so much of our dad's lessons have influenced our lives and speak directly to this situation here, I think it's important that we're intentional about how his legacy lives on through us in this work that we're doing. I tell people all the time that the greatest inheritance that my father left me wasn't $1 million, wasn't $1 billion, it was a front row seat to humanity over and over and over and over again. Now, Ayanna also knows, like my father, while I don't have the entertainment side, I definitely am extremely loquacious like our dad was. So every now and again, she's going to have to tell me, because I have a story for everything. And anybody who knows me. In fact, my brother Christian always used to say, when somebody was telling a long story, he'd be like, oh, you telling one of those Yohance stories. But there's so many pieces that tap in because our dad lived such a rich life, and he never hid anything from us. Never hid a phone call, never hid whether it was top secret documents that he was looking at. He let us know the truth of what was going on in the world. And along that line, I get asked this question a lot too in interviews about dad, is of all of the areas, from health and nutrition to comedy to civil rights, you name it, what was the part of your father's legacy that was the most significant, right? Or that was strongest and deepest to him? And when I tell people, I was like, it was none of those. It's like Dick Gregory, more than anything, was a spiritual master. We won't get into this now, just because, again, it'll turn into your Yohance story. But for those who know, when our father passed, he gave us 9 days more than medical science can explain. It was, he ultimately had a hole in the artery around his heart and lived for 9 days before the doctors even realized that. But in that time, he was able to do and say everything that needed to be said, everything that needed to be done. So with that spiritual world master, that universal master that he was, he always let us know that there was a paradigm shift, not only that was coming, but was necessary for us to get to where we need to be in doing the work that we're doing, right? And with that, along that line as well, our dad was also very clear in understanding who we are, right? There were times growing up when he would come home. And, growing up, I say, Dad, as a kid, Dad was home maybe 60 days out of the year because he traveled so much. But when he would be home, the first thing we would do is get in a prayer and meditation circle. And one of the things that he would say over and over is, I am, right? I am. The understanding of being. Part of that paradigm shift and part of how we want to approach this situation here is starting with who we are, not with who we're not, right? So that comes with not letting others define you, but also being very clear about who you are and leading with that. Because if you are, there's a whole lot of other stuff you won't have to say. Okay. So that's kind of as an example of that and how it's so important for us to have this paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. I saw a perfect example of it. I think it was Sunday night or Monday night, and I called you because there was this show on CBS, and it was the Grammy Salute 50 Years of Hip Hop, right? Mm-hmm. And anybody and everybody you can think of in the history of hip hop was on there, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, you think of it, you name it. But I'm gonna ask you a question right now. Now, a lot of times when people say that, obviously there's like a trick or something in there, but
it's a trick.
Yeah, don't look at it in that regard. Just think, just give your honest answer what you would think, not what you think I'm asking, right? Okay. What you think it would be. So, 50 years of hip hop. Anybody and everybody who's alive has the ability to be there. Who would you think would end the show of ever either an individual rapper or a group? Because clearly you're ending with the biggest thing. You know, some people just did a couple of lines of their songs. Other people did their whole song. The folks who ended did multiple songs. Like, you know, they're the closing act. They're you, right? So of that, I'll give you three thoughts of groups or individuals who you think that could be.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, because I guess I'm thinking it could be somebody that's old school, that's still alive, or somebody who's just the most famous in terms of contemporary.
So give me three. Across that.
Rakim.
Okay, Rakim. Nas. Jay-Z, right?
Yeah.
All great choices, right? Right.
Lauryn Hill.
Lauryn Hill. Now, I don't know. I didn't see the whole piece, so I don't know if Jay-Z was there. Rakim was definitely there. I think Nas may have been there as well, right? Mm-hmm. You had Public Enemy that was there. Mm-hmm. You had Too Short that was there. Not just, you know, conscious folks went across Luke was there. Like Jermaine Dupri, you think of all of the bandwidth from the East Coast, the West Coast, conscious, all of that. All of it was there, right? Mm-hmm. LL was there. Queen Latifah was there. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to ask you another question, so this may help to limit it a little bit. Because it was Grammy salute to the person or group that closed were the first person to win the hip hop Grammy in history. When a Grammy was created for hip hop, they were the first one to win it.
I'm thinking of who did Rapper's Delight.
Sugar Hill Gang.
Yeah.
Okay, right. That would make sense too, right? Right. Okay. All my hip hop heads out there. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Right now, let me be clear. I ain't got any hate against Will Smith or Jazzy Jeff, right? None whatsoever. I listened to their songs, right? I wasn't somebody who bashed them for, you know, not being hood or not being street or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about the history, 50 years of hip hop, how could anybody here, anybody from Philadelphia, anybody in the Smith or the Jazz or the Fresh Prince or the Jazzy Jeff would say it would be them? Why? Because they, being the other, defining what our music was and who we were. True. So it makes sense that, yes, the Grammy salute would have the first Grammy winner. So that makes sense. But the fact that, and it brings me back, I remember that and the controversy around that they would say, we're saying this is the best of hip hop, right? At that time, I forget what year, 90s, whatever, that was done. And so I say that to say, and mind you, everybody was there and they were all, you know, rocking on right there with them, right there with them at that time. So, you know, the fact that, you know, the thought that we would then, Rakim, Too Short, the Roots were there, you know, Questlove introduced them, that they would co-sign that this is the best. We all too often get into the script of telling their script. One of the most powerful things that the founder of my children's school, shout out to Wilson Baker Academy of Excellence Achievement, Baba Kwawi Mana, said to me when I brought my first son there, who went to Wilson Baker in kindergarten, And I'm looking around, and all my kids have always gone to African-centered schools here in the D.C. area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking at it, and I'm blown away by the school and the visit. And I asked him, and I said, Bob Wilson Baker Academy for Excellence and Achievement. I don't, one, you let me know it was named after Dr. Amos Wilson and Mama Ella Baker.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, why don't you all lead an African-centered school? Because certainly an African-centered school. And he said, what's the name again? Wilson Baker Academy of Excellence and Achievement. Okay. What school of excellence anywhere in the world would not focus on the history and the essence of the children that they're educating? Mm. So if we go to China and we go to their top school of excellence, does it have to say Chinese-centered education, right? Or, right. We again have gotten into qualifying and defining anything that's Black and excellent as so. HBCU, Black excellence, Black beauty, even Black Jesus. Like, that's an oxymoron, right? I mean, why, or not an oxymoron, but that's a double entendre. Like, why would we, as though, because then the other piece becomes the norm. So of saying Black Jesus, obviously that would say that Jesus was white. Like, that doesn't even make sense. So for us, as we're going through this conversation, right? Mm-hmm. If we're starting with defining who we are, mm-hmm. right? If I say we are great, just like Dad said, and going back to that grounding of who Dick Gregory was, of being loving and lovable. Mm-hmm. I don't have to say anti-war. I don't have to say anti-racist, anti-this, anti-sexist, I don't have to say any of those. Because love, like that always said, God and fear don't exist in the same place at the same time. God, the other piece that we would say with I am was God is love, right? Marvin said that. I forget which song he's referring. God, if God is love and we are saying we are loving and lovable, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that immediately defines who we are. Yes. And we don't have to go through all the anti. So right here, right now, we are focusing on the love, the lovability, and the humanity that is going to run through every thread of the conversations that we're talking about today.
Absolutely. So in sharing all of that, I think it's a good segue because I wanted him to, we can't assume that everybody knows or is paying attention to what's happening in Palestine or what's happening in Congo, what's happening in Sudan, what's happening in Haiti. We can't assume anything. And my personal knowledge is relatively limited, but in the last, Yohance was the first person to tell me many years ago about the occupation, the 75-year occupation of the Palestinians, well before October 7th, 2023. But I think it's important because a lot of, I've been talking to a lot of people who are like, I don't know what's going on. And for some people, their only entry into the information is CNN, is the Western mainstream media outlets. So we want to share some things. And again, it doesn't mean that we are, experts or historians, but it means that we're paying attention. And we have some things that we want to share and kind of just connect the dots so we understand, how does this relate to this? Why should we care? What does this have to do with me? What does this have to do with Black people? What does it have to do with anything? So I'm just going to ask you to jump right into Palestine.
Yeah, so just, and again, we've got so much to talk about. When we were planning this out, we're like, already we had to cut it in half and save that for part 2, so look out for part 2. The other part is that regardless how much we plan, we're not going to be able to address everything even we plan to address today. So I want to try to add some things that I think maybe are nuanced, that are a little bit more than what you can find online, but very quickly, and again, like Ayanna said, it's not that, we're scholars on this or this, that, whatever, but we do come in this with the spirit of our father, who, as many people knew, read over 100 newspapers a day and was always gathering, information. And as he said, knowledge isn't power, information is power. And so that idea, and again, like in so many ways, Dad was ahead of his time, because what age are we in now? We're in the information age, where literally information data is the currency of the world. The fact that we're here on these platforms doing this for free is because information is the most valuable commodity that, whether it's Google, Meta, any of these technology companies trade in.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding that and synthesizing that information, when we look at, like you said, the history of this, clearly Judaism, right, and Zionism are not the same thing. So people say, what is Zionism? Well, Zionism is the notion of Jewish people going back to their historic homeland that was granted to them by God, right? Now, and they had been displaced, spread around the world, and that the idea of Zionism is Jews coming back to have a Jewish state in the former Holy Land area that was Palestine. And so the question, right, is very deep, right? So it goes back to, again, definition. And we're going to talk about this a lot, like the terms we use and what we accept. I'm not a Christian. I'm not Jewish. I'm not Muslim. I'm not of any of the Abrahamic religions. Majority of indigenous people around the world were not. Mm-hmm. And the billions that are, whether it be Muslims or Christians in particular, they are so, and were introduced to that through colonialism. Let's be clear about that, yeah. Right? So that is not a part of my origin story. I don't knock Jews or Muslims or Christians or anyone else saying that your original people were the chosen people. And if you go through the creation mythology of most peoples of the world, they center themselves. You know, I remember somebody telling me that and you see it on the continent as well, the African continent, but that the word that many indigenous American people used to define themselves was the people, right? I'm the people, you're something else, right? So yeah, I'm the chosen people, of course. You know, there's a funny, for those of you who haven't seen it, there's a great episode of the Chappelle Show where he's talking about the Antoine Fisher movie, and he was like, hey, you know, Antoine Fisher's story, written by Antoine Fisher. It's like, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could write a story about yourself, right? And it gets a little NSFW after that, so just go back and look at it, right? But yeah, if I'm writing a story, like, yeah, I'm the greatest, and God said it, and me alone. Now, anybody who's not even a parent has had anything to do with children. And I ask this to people all the time. I said, which one of your children is your favorite? Which one of them do you preserve above others? And my kids ask me this all the time. Which one is your favorite? And I say a combination of their names, right? Of course, as a loving parent, you're not going to put one child above the other, right? So why would we think the creator, the most omnipotent force in all of creation, would be lower than we are as people? Come on now, right? So, yes, that's your story. That's the tale you're going to tell. Okay, fine, so be it. That doesn't mean I and everybody else have to buy into that, right? Mm-hmm. So this story and the spread of it, because let's be real, the spread of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism was that which was spread the least, right? The evangelists and the missionaries were Christian and Muslim, mm-hmm. right? And so really, when you get down to it, the whole Zionism is not a Jewish concept. Because, and this is why some people may be confused when they see so many Orthodox Jews, Hasidic Jews, what they call religious observant Jews, that are not Zionists and against the state of Israel. Not because of human rights issues, maybe some are that way. But according to the Torah and the teachings, God has to return his children to Israel, not a political nation state. So with that, right, where did a lot of what we hear about Zionism first come from? So, you know, a lot of people talk about Theodor Herzl, who was a Hungarian Jew, who is credited with starting the Zionist movement. And he had like the first conference in 1897, right? But before that, the popular conversation of Zionism existed amongst Christian fundamentalists. And it wasn't because they had any love for Jews. It was because, according to the Bible, in order to bring about the second coming of the Messiah and then the apocalypse and the end times and all that, Jews first had to be returned to the Holy Land, right? So these were folks that were raging anti-Semitic folks, but it was part of their story to get to what they wanted, right?
Gotcha.
And so there's something very key there. And again, I'm not going to go through too much of the historical timeline, but what is fundamental of this is in this timeline, then we, that area of the world, which was Palestine at that time, was colonized by England, the United Kingdom. They're starting from the...
What time period are we talking about?
So we're talking about the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Okay.
So from that, then, after this Zionist conference, you have this idea of, okay, yes, Jews who had been displaced, and let me say this, and I'm going to say it multiple times. We talk about this all the time. What I cannot say, and this goes to this dogma piece that I'm about to talk about as well. The persecution of Jews in Europe is beyond a real thing.
Yeah.
It is 1,000%, well before the Holocaust, which was just, and again, I'm not a Holocaust denier. I have no time for Holocaust deniers. I have no time for anybody. Again, if we define ourselves as human, and that's what we're starting with, in humanity, anything that would bring about the denigration of any people just based on who they were, let alone the mass murder in the sickest forms of millions of them. Again, we don't even need to say that, but just to be clear, for those who, because a lot of times those things are conflicted. But so you have this group of Jews coming out of this Zionist conference, 1800s, 1900s, saying, okay, listen, we've been literally from, before the Holocaust. So we talk about the Spanish Inquisition, where you either you convert to Christianity, or you're murdered in the most brutal way. From country to country, from Eastern Europe to Western, wasn't just Eastern Europe, wasn't just Germany and the Slavias and Russia, but Western Europe too, and yes, the United States as well, and we're going to talk about this again. Be clear, at that point, Jews were not white. European Jews were not white. They were not they didn't have that white card in America. Anybody who questions that, look at the history of Jewish ghettos around the turn of the century in the United States, and the treatment throughout the rest of Europe. The places that they weren't oppressed was in Palestine because of their religion or their ethnicity. So you have people saying, okay, listen, let's buy land, let's move to Palestine. Then you have this understanding of the UK that's shifting its political stance. And so in 1918, you have the Balfour Document Agreement that's saying, understanding this Zionism pull of Jews coming in a largely Arab land that is Palestine, of this idea of working towards at some point developing, when colonialism ends, developing two separate nations, a Jewish state and a Palestinian state.
So what did the Balfour Declaration say?
So the Balfour Declaration basically laid the groundwork for that. Now, the actual creation of Israel did not happen until 1948. Okay. But the important thing to note, right, is that just like we have to know who we are, we can never forget who and what white supremacy and colonialism, not just settler colonialism, but colonialism is. It is about, and we say this, and a lot of people, so I'll say it here for the first time, a lot of people may raise their eyebrows when I say, white supremacy is not the child of racism. White supremacy is actually the parent of racism. Right. And I say that there are many white supremacists who are not racist. I'm like, wait, what? How is that possible? When I say not racist, meaning that they don't really believe that black people or any other people of color are inferior because of their race or who they are.
They know the truth.
They know the truth. And white supremacy is just that. I want to be on top. In a class that I do with another local powerhouse here, the Love More movement, I was explaining, I'll say, if I want to be the highest on the mountain, not at the top of the mountain, but the highest of the mountain, and there are 3 people above me, well, how do I get to be the highest on the mountain? Either I pass them, I climb up past them, or they come below me.
Right.
So that's a huge part of what white supremacy was. It's like, okay, Those areas we can dominate, we're going to dominate. And those areas we're dominated, we're going to flip the script and make them, whoever the them is, think that they're lesser.
Right.
So I see your beauty. I see your radiant skin that is sun-kissed, your hair, and I'm going to make you think that's bad.
Right.
I'm going to make you poison your body to the degree that you're putting toxic chemicals on your skin to change your natural beauty. Meanwhile, I'm going to spend everything I can to be in the Caribbean, on the coast, on the continent, getting as brown and getting as much of that sun activation as I can, right? And so with that and with understanding that, the idiot, if when UK is moving out of the region, right? We can't believe that these were righteous folks and suddenly got religion, just like when the slavery ended, that those folks that were owning slaves one second now were righteous people the next second. Right. Or that in South Africa, apartheid, that those who were literally murdering up until the moment of the elections and then still after the racially oppressed majority in South Africa were some way righteous. No, they had already planned what the next trick was. Exactly. So sharecropping was already ready to go when slavery ended, right? And so the UK realized we've got to have a placeholder here in this region that is so rich. We're going to tap into a very real, horrific piece that has gone on for centuries in Europe, the oppression of Jews. And then and again, the Holocaust was after the Balfour Agreement. When that came through, it was all the more, right? This is an opportunity to create what we know is divide and conquer. And, when Dr. Naomi Klein, in a post I saw of her recently said it best, that not only do you have the case of settler colonialism, of what that was that was creating, right? That you take a people that are oppressed and that understandably and righteously are saying, we need to be safe, right? We need to be safe whether that was in Russia, whether that was in Poland, whether that was in Germany. Yeah. And then you travel thousands of miles away and tap some folks that had nothing to do with the horror that was rained on them and say, I'm going to snatch this up from you, knowing you're going to create conflict. Right. No, we have to remember, Balfour, the UK, England, the US later on, these were some of the most, not just anti-Semitic countries at the time, but in the history of the world. And so as Dr. Klein points out, she's like, here we have settler colonialism that was prefaced under reparations, right? And where else do we see that, right? And it's important for us as Black folks to be tuned in. We see that with Liberia, right? We see that with Liberia, a group of white folks here that not were about repatriating Africans because they loved Africans, because they thought we were inferior. But many of us who had gone, remember, it wasn't these African-centered folks saying, hey, let me go back to my country. Many of these folks that had been fully anglicized or Christianized, and then going in with a superiority, I'm going back to this savage land. And so when you look at the history of Liberia, which is a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, but what you see when Dr. Klein was talking about that, settler colonialism disguised as reparations, they knew from the beginning, not only am I giving something up because I don't want to give my own thing up, but I'm creating conflict. Right. And one of the primary tools, wherever you see it in the world, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in the Americas, whether it's in Asia, is divide and conquer. That's maybe rule number one of their playbook. If you open up the white supremacy playbook, that's that. So that's what we saw happen. The United States comes in later down the road, which we'll talk about later here. They weren't, the UN, League of Nations, created Israel in 1948. But the U.S. wasn't the player then in 1948 that they are today. Okay. And that started in 1967, but we'll talk about that a little more later on.
Okay. So, so can you talk about just, again, because we don't want to assume what anybody knows or doesn't know, the 75-year occupation, just kind of what that has looked like before, because a lot of people started paying attention on October 7th. So what happened?
Yeah. So this goes back to, one of my favorite ancestors, El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X, one of my favorite quotes of his, where he says two things. Of all the disciplines, history is our greatest teacher. And that a people, and this is going to come up a couple of places as well, can only look as far forward as they can look as far backwards. Mm-hmm. And we know that's Sankofa, right? Mm-hmm. That principle of Sankofa. Well, for those who just woke up on October 7th and think that it started then, mm-hmm. Sometimes it's younger folks, sometimes it's folks who never paid attention, but what has gone on in occupying Palestine has been front and center at numerous times over those 75 years, because obviously right after 1948, war broke out because people don't accept oppression, bottom line, right? People don't accept, I'm going to take something from you and treat you however I want. Even though it was the UK and the United Nations that did that created that, knowing they were creating that tension. Mm-hmm. And so at every point when a war was fought, the war was won by the most dominant power. And why was that power so dominant, that power being Israel, is because it wasn't just Israel. It was Israel fighting with all of Western Europe and America, right? And let's be clear, Israel not only could not exist as an idea without the UN, but literally could not exist without the aid of the United States and Western Europe, yes. Right? And so what you have then is every time there was a war of people pushing back against this theft of land, the oppression that was put upon them, when, and I won't even say Israel, and I'll say when Western Europe won, because that's who was fighting, right? That's you know, we talk about the Cold War, right? Wherever it was played out, it wasn't those small countries. It wasn't Somalia versus Ethiopia or that. It was the United States and the United Kingdom. I mean, it was the United States and the Soviet Union, right? Fighting through these other proxies. So that's who was fighting the Palestinians, right? Mm-hmm. And so at every point, they took more and more land. So now we're redrawing the map. We're redrawing it again. We're redrawing it again. We're redrawing it again. And at every point, you know, so 1967, we redraw the lines again. We take more territory. Then we say, you know, anybody, any Jew, anywhere in the world has the right to come to Israel, right? And you can basically, just like in the U.S., where it was like, where basically the Dred Scott decision said, in essence, there is no law that protects a black man that a white man has to honor, right? There is that Jews anywhere around the world can come and lay claim to this area, regardless of who was there, how long they had been there before, or anything along that line. And so the repression keeps getting stricter and stricter and stricter and stricter as we move along that. And so ultimately, you have what is supposedly the Palestinian land stripped down to the West Bank, mm-hmm. and Gaza. So the river, the Jordan River, where the West Bank is, and the sea, where Gaza is in this strip of land. And at every point, it's less and less and less. And as we see right now, you know, regardless of what political and military leaders say, if this is your land, and I'm saying I'm gonna bomb here, and then I keep pushing down, and you have to leave here, you have to leave here, you have to leave here. Ultimately, there is no other way to define that as ethnic cleansing. There is no other way. And so that has been going on for literally 75 years, different iterations, different lines drawn. And so
this is a genocide.
Yeah, hands down.
This is a genocide. Be clear about that. So when we hear these conversations and words like conflict and war, they always bothered me. When you think about war, you think about two powerful opposing forces, and that's not what this is. I remember I saw a post and somebody explained Israel's occupation and ethnic cleansing of Palestine in a video, and it showed like a pack of wild dogs, and it was like cornering, there was this little kitten, and they were like, this is what we're looking at. This is not a war, this is not a conflict. So just us being able to get clear that the language that's being used does not match the reality of what's been happening and what is happening. So it's important they talk about, oh, it's an open air prison. they don't control, Palestinians don't control, as we see now, the water and food and all those things have been cut off, but to be a people and not be in control of your water, of your electricity, of being able to move, being able to leave. What else is that but an occupation? And so it's displacement, it's enslavement, it's death and destruction, it's genocide. It's a combination of things, all bad. And so that is something that is important for us to understand, because for those who are just paying attention on October 7th or just looking at the mainstream news, I keep seeing on CNN a couple of times that I've watched the Israel-Hamas war. How does a whole government have a war with what is Hamas?
Again, Hamas is a political party, right? And I think one of the really important things, I wanted to mention this earlier, that we have to hold on to, because it's like, well, how do a people commit genocide, right? Because as human beings, there's a natural, what do you want to call it, spirit, humanity, or whatever that runs through us that keeps us from doing certain things.
Yeah.
So when we looked at, right, part of the piece with the eugenics movement, and these scientists, many of which that came out of Eastern Europe, when you look at those psychiatrists and psychologists, Nazi psychiatrists and psychologists that were saved from prosecution after the Holocaust, many of them that wound up here, they were looking at these things just like right now when you had people imprisoned in Guantanamo, right? That you had psychiatrists using the knowledge of the human brain and psychological theory to better torture people, right? Yeah. So if I can't, because I cannot oppress an entire group of people if I'm in the majority, if I'm in the minority, right, without some kind of help.
Yes.
And so part of that is I've got to get you to be on board with it. Mm-hmm. And the way I do it is by taking something that is all about white supremacy, which is about greed and power and control, not even money, greed, power, and control. Money, we have a whole other conversation. For those who don't know, in my day job, I'm a corporate financial professional, and we don't understand money at all in this country, this world. But greed, power, and control, and make you think it's ideological, and they do that on both sides. Right? So, because what am I willing to fight and kill and die for? Am I willing to fight and kill and die for, if I'm an average person, the 0.0001% of the world to be even more filthy rich? And I'm like, absolutely not. Right. But will I die for religion? Will I die for my people? Will I die for my convictions? Right? And so, as you see, as we go through this, these folks are completely agnostic in every single way. Absolutely. Not only are they agnostic, those who you would think were nationalists aren't even nationalists. So in this case, not only do the governments of the world that are oppressing Palestinian people, whether it be Israel, Western Europe, and the United States, not only do they not care about Palestinians, they don't give a damn about the average Israeli or Jew.
Exactly.
They have it's about, how do I keep myself in power, manipulate, and control? But if I can keep my masses thinking it's about something else, you look at South Africa during apartheid, 4 different classifications of race. You look at Brazil during the period after enslavement, 30 different classifications of race. Why? Because in an area where the oppressed group is the majority, well, I can't keep them the majority, right? Because they're going to come over. So here, because black folks weren't the majority, it's like you got a drop of black blood in you, your great-great-great-great-grandfather was black, you're black.
Right.
Meanwhile, somebody who's as dark as you and I in South Africa could be classified as colored, and in Brazil somewhere else down along this line. So I have to create these ideological wars knowing that you will fight for that. Right.
So can we talk a little bit about, leading up to October 7th, obviously this has been a very real occupation, a very real genocide happening to Palestinians. And then October 7th, the world pays attention because Israelis were killed and slaughtered. And what was the number? It was like 1,400, and then did it go down to 1,200?
Yeah, somewhere around
but
there.
a lot of Israelis were killed.
And in addition to those, 200 or so that were kidnapped and taken hostage.
And kidnapped, right. And so this was like a, oh my God moment, and it kind of felt like 9/11, like how could this happen to a protected, empowered people? And so obviously just to be clear, we are for humanity. And so the killing of anybody, innocent civilians, we don't believe in that. Our mother and father never believed in it, and neither do we. And so, but what then happened, then what happened was something else that was then used to obviously wreak unimaginable havoc on Palestinians. So we have the murder of, well over 1,000. I don't know the number, 1,200. It started out 1,400, but in that area of Israelis who were killed, and then how many that were taken as hostage. And so then it became this, okay, it's an all-out war, and we're still using these words like war as if bombing and intentionally bombing and murdering innocent civilians purposely. It wasn't like they were looking for, that's a whole nother conversation of like targeting civilians on purpose, and all the while that being your reason for saying, hey, Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel has a right to defend itself. Well, then why are you bombing at the time that children are being released from school? Why are you specifically targeting schools and hospitals and homes? Israel, who everybody knows has an incredible intelligence systems and technologies and AI that you're not able to move with precision to get your target. Your target was the people, and you made your target. You actually did exactly what you intended to do, which was wipe out tens of thousands of people, half of them children. And so we want to talk about this because there's a lot of conversations where they say, well, what side are you on? Are you pro-Palestinian or are you pro-Israel? We're pro-human. And why do I'm also hearing people, because I've been to several of the demonstrations and rallies and things like that. And what you see is people from all over the world who are really talking about, just like with, Black Lives Matter. We had to explain over and over again, this is not about us saying that we matter more. The fact that Black Lives Matter had to be created was problematic because we weren't seen as important. We weren't even seen as human or enough to be given our own humanity. So Black Lives Matter was a reactionary entity, like so many things in the history of America, that had to be created just to be able to say, we get to live, and we get to exist too. And so this whole thing of like, I hear people saying, well, why do you focus on Palestinian lives in this moment? Why not, Israelis died too, and can't we talk about them both at the same time? And it's like, you're not understanding. And it's because we've been given this image of like, even Steven. It's not even. It's never been even. So can you understand in the same way that many white people who've had Black Lives Matter signs in their yard, there's no shortage of hundreds and thousands and maybe millions of white people who have said Black Lives Matter. They didn't say in the next instance, and white lives matter too, because it was already understood that white lives mattered. So that is something that it is important for us to address.
I think, and there's an Egyptian comedian, his name is escaping me now, and he's been on a lot of the news shows. And he had a chart, right, showing year by year, over the 75 years, the number of Israelis killed in that year and the number of Palestinians. And it would be like here and here, right? That disparity, year after year after year after year after year. And because of the fact, right, it's just like we say here, right? I was just reading an article about the Charles Stewart case in Boston in like 1989, 1990, and that was where the white man killed his pregnant wife on a bridge in Boston and said a black guy shot him and he shot himself as well.
Right.
In Boston, every black neighborhood in Boston was ripped apart.
Absolutely.
I mean, one after the other. You don't have to say white lives matter because you show it with your actions the same way. That from 1967, 1975 to 2008, every time what was it, the March of Return, the peaceful demonstration of Palestinians in Gaza walking towards the Israeli border that were then shot and killed and children targeted, where a journalist was killed, right? And there was no international outcry and war. That lets you know, right, that Palestinian lives don't matter when I can kill you by the thousands.
Right.
And there's no outcry. There's no talk about censoring people for standing with Israel on the House floor at that time when Palestinian children were killed. Right. And so it demonstrates that. And clear, here's the thing, right? We talk about this numerous times. It's not rocket science. People want us to think it is, right?
It's not complicated.
When you're
nuanced.
Based in here, who are some of, in this day and age, right? Even outside of my own knowledge of the situation, those that I've gotten the best information from in the last 2 months have been Israeli and non-Israeli Jews.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And it's those who really, and again, there was another shout out, Love Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman, and was listening to her from day one. I always listen to her every morning. But she had a Jewish Israeli human rights lawyer who was on the line, and this was in the first week of October 7th. And most of his work was defending Palestinians. And his mother or grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. And he said the thing I think it was his grandmother, told him was the most difficult part about living in that degree of inhumanity, the Holocaust, was retaining your own humanity.
Yeah.
Right? You know, we see it. People who grow up seeing mass murders. We talk about genocide. We talk about crime. We talk about over and over. You become immune to it to a degree. But for those who have tapped into it and see it and understand it for what it is, they're going to be the most ardent defenders of protecting humanity.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what we're seeing with the Jewish Voices for Peace. That's what we're seeing for the Never Again group. Right? That's what we're seeing.
The ex-Israeli IDF soldiers.
And with that, right? Why are so many of the ex-soldiers, why were they soldiers and why are they now ex-soldiers that are standing for peace? Because as children, just like white folks, children here in America with the story of racism, they were given the propaganda of the ideology.
Absolutely.
It's them against us. They hate us for who we are.
Absolutely.
When they then got there on the front lines, particularly in the West Bank and in the settlements area, they saw the contradiction for themselves. And here's the thing. Not just with young Israelis, but young folks around the world, particularly in so-called Western developed countries, and certainly within Israel, when people are living more comfortably, right? When you're living without the threat over your shoulder at every moment, you're able to tap more into your humanity.
Absolutely.
When you're not worrying about where dinner's coming from, when you're not worried about, am I going to have a place for me and my children to sleep tonight, you're able to tap more. And so just like you see with Cuban Americans, younger Cuban Americans are more inclined to want to have full relations and diplomatic relations with Cuba. Right? Because it's like, hey, wait, this is our family over here, or I'm seeing some of the hypocrisy of the lies that were told to us about who and what this group, this boogeyman was. Same thing with many young Israelis. They're seeing, you saw, and I remember going back to like the late 90s, MTV doing these youth summits between young Palestinians and young Israelis, right? Coming together and seeing that. And so, and what we also saw, and let's be, and we talk about, October 7th and why this particularly matters. Let's be clear in saying that Palestinian lives matter and protecting Palestine. You also are saving Israeli lives.
Absolutely.
You also are standing up for Israeli lives because, as we saw in some of these leaked footage that came out, let's be clear, right? A group of people and their government aren't always the same.
Absolutely.
Right? And the Netanyahu government is corrupt as they come from they're corrupt to the bone, right? And many Israelis knew and understood that. And prior to October 7th, you had probably the largest national uprising in the history of Israel against their government, because they were trying to, in the government, the Netanyahu government was trying to restructure the Constitution and basically limit their country's Supreme Court in a way that's tantamount to becoming the dictatorship. And so Israelis took to the streets by hundreds of thousands, right, to stand up against this. There were already a group that were opposed to the occupation, but then now you're attacking my individual personal liberties and freedoms. So folks standing up there, right? Now, I always say this, right? I don't know. There, when Dad would talk to us about COINTELPRO and so many conspiracies of this, that, whatever, these were things he could personally certify to, that he had direct connections with intelligence agencies or people on the ground. Right. Nowadays, it's so easy to put out information, right? And so easy to put out misinformation, right? So I can't say, and just like during like COVID, I told people, like, I can't say what it is, right? But it could be any of these things. Right. So, and that's, I think, the critical eye that Dad raised us with in the same way here with this, right? You're going to tell me that, I'm not saying that the Israeli government was behind the October 7th piece. But now we see reporting coming out from there being U.S. top papers, New York Times, showing that there was intelligence that both the Israeli government and the U.S. government had. This ain't me. This ain't some, so-called wacko on the internet. This is the New York Times saying this, that they had evidence over a year before that Hamas was planning something on the southern border. Didn't have a particular date, just like with 9/11, just like with Pearl Harbor. Exactly. Well, hey, if I let this happen, now, again, and I tell people this too, that this white supremacist system has gotten way more sophisticated. They're going to do less of the conspiracy doing themselves and more allowing it to happen. Right? Because with technology, with the internet, we can find out so much, right? But if I can create and manufacture something else that distracts you over here, well, I can act like I don't know what's going on over here. Absolutely. Because here's the thing, right? If I'm the president or the prime minister of Israel, and I care about my people, right? And I've just lost 1,200, right? Even if I'm seething with rage, right? And I'm like, I'm going to wipe these folks out, right? If I'm saying that, and if I care about my people, I'll put it in the case of my children, right? If somebody's just broken into my house, ravaged my family, defiled the children, murdered two, and is standing there with a gun to my baby's head, am I going to do what I want to do to them at that moment? No, I've got to protect those that are still here, right? So if I'm saying you got 200 of them, you took out 1,200, you got 200 still, and I'm a bomb whatever, I don't give a damn about those 200. Absolutely not. I don't care anything about those 200, right? And that's what we heard in those recordings with the hostages that had been released. Absolutely. And some that have family that are still in Hamas. They're like, you didn't know where we were. You were shelling a block from where we were. We could have been killed. And what you're doing now, what you're saving now, like it was a wife saying, her and her child were free. The husband was still there. You're making him unsafe. Right. They don't care. Right. They don't care because this government, the Netanyahu government, like so many other, don't give a damn about their people. And let's say this. Yes, there are extreme zealots in the world, in every area, in every country. Christian conservatives, Islamic fundamentalists, this, that, whatever. They always want us to think the other, which isn't us, is a fundamentalist, right? When we hear a religious fundamentalist, immediately most Americans think Muslims, right? What about all the Christian fundamentalists right here, right, in this country, the domestic terrorists right here? But if the only picture that I paint of you is that, or it's just like, when we go to whatever other countries of the world, take Mexico, our next door neighbor. There's drug cartels. Oh my God, you can't go to Mexico. Like that's happening in Cancun. Like that's happening in Acapulco. Like, no, that's not happening there. You know what I mean? It may be or just like any city. Oh my God, South Central, LA. Like, you know how big South Central is? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Includes Baldwin Heights, one of the wealthiest zip codes, you know, black zip codes in the country, you
Right.
know? So there's always, I want to paint this other that you don't know with this extremist label.
Right.
Most people, while there are zealots that are there, most people are not that.
Right.
Most people of the world are just trying to live.
Right.
They're just trying to live. And so by me allowing me to live, having me have skin in the game, and that's why for the U.S. the middle class is so important.
Yeah.
Because I need you to have something to lose to continue to hold and prop this situation up, right? So if I, in fact, these people that are being oppressed, that ethnic cleansing has been going on, that genocide has been going on, if I wipe that, if I end that, right, and I give them something to live for, right, and I give them, we see these images, you know, these images that we've seen of blown out parts of Gaza, we could have, those could have been yesterday, those could have been 10 years ago, right? That's the reality. When I flip that script, well, I'm less inclined to look for freedom by any means necessary. I'm less inclined to go to the extreme end of joining a Hamas, right? I'm less inclined to say, if I know my family is taken care of and my family is living well, I'm not strapping a bomb to myself, right? And the overwhelming majority of people that you have that saying that around the world are not religious fundamentalists. These are people trying to provide something for their children. And you know, we as folks who've traveled around the world, and too, as you say, you know, anybody who's been to Gaza or the West Bank, you can't not feel. You can't not see, just like we see in so many other areas. We can go to the, you know, if we were to go to Dubai right now and see behind the glitz and the glamour, the conditions that the average Pakistani or Bangladeshi or Indian worker is living in some of the most luxurious hotels on the world, we would be horrified, right? Because that natural humanity would kick in. So yes, protecting Palestinians is also truly protecting Israelis. It may not keep those in power in place, but it is truly protecting real Israelis.
Exactly. And which is why we keep coming back around to white supremacy, because it is the cause of Israeli deaths. It is the cause of Palestinian deaths. It is the cause of millions of deaths around the world today. So we want to be able to make this connection, because the whole idea of divide and conquer is that's a separate issue over there. It has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with us. So there were some questions I wrote down that a lot of people, you know, I hear people have asked me personally, or people have said that these questions have been asked to them. And so one of the questions, there's so many other things happening in the world. I get that a lot. Like, you know, there's a lot of things that we could be focusing on. You know, why Palestine? Why are we focusing on Palestine when there's child trafficking, there's, you know, if we talk about Black Lives Matter and the police brutality against Black people in this country, the genocide, and just the current horrific state of what continues to happen to Native Americans in this country, being denied everything on their own land. We can come up with, not come up with, but real things, the rate of suicide, the drug usage, depression with our young people. There's all these things that we could focus on. And so oftentimes what Yohance and I were saying is that usually the people who are watching and saying, well, why focus on that? Usually those are the people not doing anything. Usually. It's like, because if that's the case, if these are the issues you want to bring up, do something about them. So we're not saying this should be your mantle, this should be the thing. Do whatever it is that your humanity is pushing you to do and be about. And we're saying just do that, because we've been so desensitized, and we live at a time where it can be like, oh, there's just so much going on. I just gotta get by. And that's the world we're living in. It's like, that ain't got nothing to do with me. I'm just trying to make me and mines. The me and mines is how people would say, well, if I lived during, you know, the Jewish Holocaust, whatever you would have done, whatever you're doing now, and I'm talking to myself too, whatever we would have done, we're doing now is ultimately what we would have done then. You put it in, you know, the enslavement of African people, the genocide of the Native Americans, or whatever, you know, it's like, so we just have to ask ourselves, and it's not a judgment, and if it is, I'm judging myself as well. But I'm saying that it's so easy for us to say, oh, there's so much going on in the world. Why are we focusing on this? Why not that? And it's like, okay, whatever the that is, focus on that, because it's all connected. This monster, this animal, this Humpty Dumpty, this thing, this white supremacy imperialistic beast is falling down. So any energy that we can give, even if it's just within our own beings, and the way that we treat our family and ourselves and our communities, even if we just focus on that, it's still contributing to the same thing. But I'm saying do something. And so I just wanted to, so that there was this question around, there's so many other things in the world. Why is this a focus? Why now after this time? And I just wanted to say, because I was talking to Yohance about my guilt around why I was spending so much time on Palestine and not say as much time on everything that's been happening in Congo and in many other places. You just name it, And he was helping me understand, Ayanna, you personally are witnessing in real time a genocide. You can't unsee what you've seen. And so I think that is something that I had to really come to terms with. There were 3 weeks after October 7th that I was like paralyzed. I could barely move. I didn't know. I mean, I was like, I felt guilty. I'm complicit. All of these things that I was just like, what am I doing? What am I, and how do I tap into my spirit to get the instructions to know what to do? And so I was just paralyzed with grief and so I just wanted to, he was helping me understand, like, it's like when somebody says, 1 million people were killed over there, even if those things are important to you over there, you don't have a concept of what that is. You don't have a concept of 1 million people dying. You don't have a concept of that if someone's saying it, but you have a concept of it when you're actually seeing dead bodies and decapitated babies and parents carrying their children in bags and body parts. I can never unsee what I've seen. I can never unhear the cries of the children and the mothers who are just waiting for their children to wake up, or the children who are waiting for their mothers and fathers to wake up. And so I can't tell you how many babies I've watched who were dead or alive and dismembered or having to get surgeries with no anesthesia, and then they died because of the pain that was so intense. The decomposed bodies that had to be left in the hospitals because the hospitals were being bombed and they had to evacuate. I mean, I have personally, I'm only speaking about me, I have never seen with my own eyes anything like this in my entire life. And so it doesn't mean that horrific things of this nature that we could say are worse or whatever. I'm not even going to get into worse than, but I'm saying that where horrific atrocities that are still taking place around the globe that are happening, but to be able to say, I have watched the torture over and over of small children. I've watched 9-year-old boys getting shot in the head for doing nothing. I've watched the imprisonment and the whole conversation around like the prisoners versus the hostages. Think about the language. You're talking about children who are coming out of these Israeli prisons, those who were released. Well, how old were they when they went in? They're coming out now at 12, 13, 14, 15. So you're talking about hostages. You're talking about the horrific treatment and the torture and the children, and the people who are dying in these prisons. And so for me, watching Palestinians who are saying, like, children who are like, I know this will probably be my last day, and so I'm asking the world to pay attention. We want to matter, and they're right. That is their last day, because you hear the next day or 2 days later, they're gone. The parents who are writing the names of their children on their arms and legs so that when they die, if they die, they can be identified. And all of these things that I personally have never seen, I'm forever changed. I can tell you for sure, 100%, I am forever changed. So I've been angry. I've been like, why are we business as usual? And then angry at myself, like, well, what else are you not focusing on? And so then I say, hey, have some grace. don't try to run from the pain. Let's use this, and then step back into your humanity and say, what else can we focus on? Because there's this whole conversation around the black people, and why should black people care about this, and what the conversations around Congo, and not just Congo, but Congo is which she'll talk about in a little bit. But I just wanted to say this, that some of the activists, Congolese activists, and people who are on the ground in Congo, who are saying, hey, black people don't matter, African people don't matter, y'all are spending all this time over here, what about us? And then what we're seeing, and what even many of them, or some of them, are acknowledging, is this momentum, the attention that was given to this happening and unfolding in Palestine is actually waking people up. So I have never seen so many people post about Congo and Sudan and many other places that previously nobody was talking about. So when we get to see how all of this stuff gets connected, and we say, yes, giving attention to this is giving attention to that, because when you have somebody like Tamika Mallory or Linda Sarsour, who are incredible activists on the front line, you can't find an activist more committed to black people than Tamika Mallory. If she can take the time to post about what's happening in Palestine, it's because she understands there's a connection. If Linda Sarsour, a Palestinian American activist, can take the time in the midst of her grief with family members whose lives are unsafe, and friends and comrades and family, I don't know if she had personal family, but just her people who are being slaughtered, if she can take the time to post about the murders of black people that are still happening in this country, in the midst of, we can begin to see that you don't have to choose one thing. We can do both, and whatever that and is whatever you want it to be. But let us understand how one thing really begins to elevate the other, because this conversation about, well, why should black people care? We know what oppression looks like. We know what displacement looks like. We know what genocide looks like. And that's why when you have, when there's so many, not so many, but yeah, a lot of Jewish folks who are saying, well, how dare black people call for, support Palestinians? We supported you with Black Lives Matter. Like, are you out of your mind? Do you understand that as black people, because we have been displaced, because we have been oppressed, we know what it looks like, and you should too. You should too. So how many Jewish people who are saying, not in my name? No, you're not going to use our Holocaust to justify this horrific atrocity that you are this horrific atrocity that you are perpetuating against people who had nothing to do with your persecution. But just going back to all of these questions are swirling. Why focus on Palestine? Now it's Palestine and Congo. Now I see Palestine, Congo, and Sudan. Now I see, and the list keeps going, and then we can keep going and going and going, and then we can begin to address all of the things that we don't even know about. So this is why all of this stuff matters. We care. Black people get it. The children get it. And the other thing is, it's such an unsafe conversation. It's such and I'm going to let you speak on that, because I know you're going to say something about that. But it's such an unsafe conversation. Going to the rallies and the demonstrations, I personally heard so many people talk about money they've lost, endowments, grants, and other people who are like, we want to speak but we can't. Celebrities who have been on mute, and those who have expressed to other celebrities, I really want to say something but I can't. All of those things, and it goes back to our dad and how he risked everything, because he's like, if I can't stand in truth and stand for humanity, and I got these billions, it don't mean shit. And so we're saying that this unsafe conversation is an important conversation because it's unsafe, because it's the time to talk about it when it is unsafe, because that is when you break ground and really get somewhere else. We can talk about apartheid in South Africa. We can talk about slavery, because the slavery, enslavement of African people, because at this point, everyone has acknowledged it was wrong. And so we can talk about things that are not unsafe for us to talk about, but talking about something that could get you fired, that could get your money lost, then we have to really think about, what does it mean? How uncomfortable am I willing to be to tell the truth, to stand for children, to stand for men, women, and children, and people all over the world who do not deserve to be oppressed by America, by Israel, by the UK, by France, by China, by all of these imperial powers who have wreaked havoc on the planet. Like, this is a time to speak up. If you are not moved to speak, that's one thing. But if you want to speak and you're being silent because you are afraid, that's a problem. And so that, and whatever you want to say on that, but these questions keep swirling. Right. And they're important to be answered. And you got to ask yourself, why am I silent? Maybe you're silent because you're in meditation, but maybe you're silent because you're scared. And you got to ask yourself what that's really about. I got to ask myself, anything I've done or not done, what it's really about.
Everything you said, Ayanna, is so important. And not just what you said, but how you say and deliver it. Because, for the last 10 years, as I've been saying, as brilliant as a singer you are, a performance artist, your greatest gift is the healing work that you do, because you're able to tap into people's spirit in a way that really moves beyond facts and figures that, I or anyone else can deliver. Mm. And when you say that first question of like, why should we care in comparison to these other things, I'm reminded of a couple of things. One, it goes back to first, we say defining who we are, right? Mm-hmm. As loving and lovable human beings. Once you utter that, right? You see, I don't care if it's one, let alone hundreds of innocent people being slaughtered mm-hmm. indiscriminately, and not just happening, because there's something that we need to point out. And I say this because we heard this the same way when people say, oh, well, when somebody kills a police officer, why aren't you marching the same way, right? Or when black people kill black people, right? In gang violence or whatever else. Right. There's something that's extra horrific when the entity that is not only designed, but that we pay to protect us, right? If I'm the biggest pimp on the corner and I come and beat any women around, yeah, I'm going to be mad if you hit my sister. But if this is my father, the person who is supposed to protect my sister, that does it, there's an extra level. Because when I know, hey, if I'm a child, right, and I see, somebody messed with you, you knew how we rolled as Gregory. Like, if something went down, I'm not, because I know when Gregory come in, when Liv come in, it's gonna be over, right? But when that which is supposed to protect does it, there is no justice on the other end. Right? So, like we said with the Charles Stewart situation, no white person even had to say, hey, come help. It was open warfare, right? And also, right, if a criminal kills a police officer, like, that's kind of their job, right? They're being a criminal, right? And your job is to stop criminals from doing what they're doing, right? And if that happens, oh no, there's an entire apparatus that's going to come, just like we're seeing now, right?
You're saying if what happens if somebody
kills a police officer, exactly. Just like with Hamas doing what it did, not a single Israeli had to say, come help us.
Exactly.
Right? There's already a mechanism in place.
Exactly.
And it's shock and awe. Right? Just like the bombing that the U.S. did in Iraq. Shock and awe. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
That's what we have for you. And that's part of the Israeli military doctrine, which again is probably page on the second page of the White Supremacy Handbook. Mm-hmm. It's not an eye for an eye. It's, an eye for an entire village.
Exactly.
And so with that, right, with us seeing, even if it is a small number, if I'm seeing it, it's one thing if I'm seeking out, but if I'm seeing it and I don't have an emotional response, mm-hmm. then already I'm losing my humanity, right?
And the people who are just joining, if you're seeing...
the reality of it is that if what we see happening with this genocide going on now, it's front and center. We're all seeing it.
Right.
It's front page on news, on your social media feeds, on any news, whatever, unless you're living completely unplugged, which there are people who do that, right?
Right.
But for those of us at your schools, there's, look at, there are, Ivy League presidents that are being fired around this right now, right? It is front and center. It doesn't mean those other things are not important. And here's the other piece, right? My humanity doesn't have a threshold. Right? These are not mutually exclusive zero-sum things that I can only think about this and I can only worry about this. And that's what they want us to do.
Exactly.
Right? Because now once I do that, then again, it's the divide and conquer. I don't need to care about that. So now when I'm on the block, then it's like, well, you didn't help me, so I'm not going to help you, that type of piece there, right? And like you said, too, for any of those folks, right, who, and we had that Jewish actress, I forget her name, who was denigrating black people, saying, oh, we stood with you there, or Michael, whatever the actor, whatever that is. But my thing is two things. One, refer you to members of your own community, right, who have been doing this work.
Exactly.
Not just, because I'm here. No, those who were certified, qualified, drenched in doing this work, ask them that question because they have a better answer than I do. I guarantee you that.
100%.
The other part is that know this, because I define myself as a loving human being, I didn't define myself as your ally, right? I define myself as a loving human being. And so if you are doing loving and humane work, then by definition, I'm going to be your ally in that work.
Absolutely.
There is no, if you thought, and if anyone thought, and particularly with our father, that he was doing some quid pro quo, he was standing on humanity. Absolutely. Regardless of what that is. Absolutely. Right? And so for those who say, well, along that line, how dare you stand and support with him? Well, were we as black folks who have seen the oppression of African people in the African continent over and over and over again, expecting people to stand with Boko Haram when they kidnapped those hundreds of innocent girls? Well, we say, oh, they're black. You can't talk? Oh, hell yeah, you can.
Exactly.
Because it's not humanity.
Exactly.
It's inhumane, and we're going to speak against humanity at every point. I don't care the color, the stripe, the creed, the religion, whatever.
Exactly.
And the reality of, like you said, when it's here in front of you, yes, to ignore it is a disservice and a knock, and it probably hurts the person who's doing it more than anything else because it takes away from my humanity. But the other question that you ask, and these two kind of go together around, why should black people care about this, specifically in our community? Well, I agree with you first and foremost that the person, typically the folks who are asking those questions, typically are two folks. Right? It's those who absolutely don't want to do anything. So it's like the boycott, right? Well, if even though we saw that the successful result of global boycotts and protest movements with the end of the apartheid, with the Free South Africa campaign, right? That is maybe in my lifetime the greatest demonstration of proof of concept of the importance of demonstration, right? Even outside of that, there are people, anytime you talk about a product, well, somebody else is going to buy it. If I don't buy it, what does it matter? Exactly. If I don't buy it, it's like the drug dealer, right? Well, if I don't sell it to him, somebody else will. Right. That's always a cop-out that they want you to have because they know that as long as, because it doesn't matter if I just stop. Right? And that's why we talked about we'll talk about this later, the importance of protest, not just me individually doing my own thing, but working in unison because, me one out of 8 billion people don't matter. But as a global initiative, the people absolutely have the power. Right. The trick, again, of exploitation, and not just white supremacy, but of all exploitation, is to make you think that you're powerless. Just like you said, hey, I either get to the top, at the highest point in the mountain by either passing you or putting you below me. Absolutely. The other piece, with that is, so you have those folks who are not looking to do work and are looking for any excuse. It's like me those days when I haven't worked out in a month and I'm just hoping it rains so I can have an excuse not to go out there, right? But the other piece that's with that, Yana, is then there are those who are intentionally sowing seeds of misinformation,
yes.
right? And are put there on purpose. And we've seen this, folks that have a presence in our community, yes. that, why Palestinians, this, that, whatever, what have they done? Like, they're intentionally sowing those seeds of disinformation. And I likened it to what we were talking about, the Carly Russell situation. Mm-hmm. So the new age of COINTEL isn't like, oh, I've got to go and create something on my own, create something, mm-hmm. right? And false and hire somebody. I can just flood you with a bunch of information because it's going to distract you. Mm-hmm. So those of us who do this work know that there is an epidemic of missing and murdered, abducted Black and Indigenous American women yes. in this country.
Yes.
So much so that and not only are Native American and Black women kidnapped and disappeared and murdered at the highest rates of any women in this country, right? Mm-hmm. It's also the least reported about. And I ask people, I say, when have you ever heard of a national alert about a Native American or Black girl that has gone missing, mm-hmm. right? There's been times we live in the county that I live in Prince George's, Maryland. Mm-hmm. There are people in my own county, girls that were missing for 2 weeks that I never even heard of, right? But with the Carly Russell, the sister in Alabama who, faked her disappearance, mm-hmm. that was front and center national news within less than 24 hours,
exactly.
right? And as Dad always talks, that's not by accident. Now, remember, they had cameras all on that highway.
Right.
I am convinced that they knew that she was not kidnapped, mm-hmm. that they had that video surveillance footage, because that's the first thing that you would do. And not to say they created it. Okay, now I'm going to throw this out there to get national attention. This is the first time. So then I can say, look, it's a hoax.
Exactly.
And so now I don't ever have to report about this piece again.
Exactly.
The other piece along that line, but when we speak specifically to the history of why should we care? Because we're all fighting the same beast.
Absolutely. And
standing in solidarity. And when we do what Malcolm taught us, looking back and looking at history, we see that Malcolm stood in solidarity. We see that from the Garveyites to so many countless others, William Shepard, you name it, of Black folks in the United States, in the Caribbean, mm-hmm. on the continent, that have stood in solidarity. You look at it when we transition to Congo, we talk about the whole premise of the Congo, which got them into the political situation that they are now, is because they stood on Pan-Africanism.
Right.
I would show people the picture of the West Wall when in 2020, Palestinians drew the picture of George Floyd and showing a black hand and a brown hand
exactly.
uniting together.
Exactly.
That while they're catching way more hell in that moment than the average Black person was catching, but they still could stand for us. And one thing I'll say, too, because I do a lot of work in standing in partnership and allyship with our Native American brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. I remember a sister, Amanda Blackhorse, who is a Dene Navajo activist and just powerful. I would say that she was one of the main forces for forcing the Washington football team to finally change its racist name. Mm-hmm. And I remember 2 instances of reaching out to her. One, around the summer of George Floyd, mm-hmm. And saying, hey, this is an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And her and another powerful sister, Crystal Echohawk, who is the founder and executive director of a nonprofit Native American organization called Illuminatives, all of their work was focused on supporting us. Mm. Okay? Oh, here's this opportunity. They weren't even doing that. And just the other day when I reached out to Amanda again about an issue related to another racist mascot with the Kansas City football team, she was like, listen, I haven't really been focused on mascot work because I'm so focused on what's going on in Palestine.
Right.
So when you are a real activist, when you are a real human being, that question doesn't even come up, right? Exactly. And on top of it, for those folks who want to try to throw cold water on that, there is absolutely a history of Palestinians standing in solidarity. You look at 100%. South Africa, right? 100%. And you look at the solidarity that's gone back and forth. Palestinians supporting South Africa and South Africans and most recently embodied in one of the most powerful political voices right now, Minister Naledi Pandor, who happens to be our god cousin, is just, has any time, just Google her, look her up, any of her conversations, whether it's within the South African Parliament or the United Nations, the most brilliant and eloquent explanation of why the world of oppressed people need to stand in solidarity. And let's be honest, what we're seeing is we're at a critical juncture in world history where more people in the history of the world have been the victims of white supremacy and colonialism, both settler and otherwise, than have been the victimizers. Absolutely. And so we understand that, we see that natural tie. And yes, we hold up Palestine, but we're not limited to that.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit about, Yohance and I have conversations about language.
Yeah, can I just interject? There was one piece that I know, and I know we're running short on time, but I want to be, that's very important.
Sure.
When you were talking about, and this is, I think, the most critical component with all of this. You say, why is this so dangerous, right, to talk about now, right? Mm-hmm. And let me dispel something for folks out here, right? There is this note, again, this ideological piece that's often put on us in our community, that Jews run the world, right? And particularly are destroying the black community, right? Mm-hmm. We're very clear, while there are Jewish merchant banks, while there were Jewish banks that helped to finance the slave trade, Jewish-run banks that helped to finance the slave trade, insurance companies, all of that along the line. And in fact, even after the Holocaust, Israel supporting, and so many Jews supporting the racist apartheid state. While we know that's the case, let's be clear about the fact. This isn't dangerous to talk about because Jews are so powerful around the world, right? If they were so powerful as a people, not individual of the 0.001%, if they were so powerful, the hell that they experienced for hundreds of years wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. The reason that they're so powerful is because what they, that being not Jews, but Israel, is the pawn for. Right? Mm-hmm. Remember I said earlier, the U.S. didn't have the skin in the game that it had in 1948 that it has now. So why is it so powerful? Why is the Israeli government the only government that by state law, by nearly half of the states in this country, if I'm doing business with that state, I have to pledge I'm not participating in the divestment, the boycott, divestment, or sanctioning of this country. I don't even have to pledge that against the United States. I can get a contract in Mississippi right now, and I don't have to say I won't protest against the United States. Why is that? It's not about Jews, right? Why is it? Is that, again, we have so much rich information here on this. So 1986 on the Senate floor, and it's so, timely, and just like, Dr. Carr says, the ancestors are always on time, that then Senator Biden, 1986, not knowing he'd be president right now, said, if there wasn't an Israel, we would have to invent one for our interests. Let's be clear. The United States has never fought a war based on any moral creed whatsoever. Ever. Every single war and every funding of any war has always been about the elites, not the United States, but the elites' financial interests. So there was this picture, and I asked you about this, that Dad, and this was like, I always, like I said, Dad always brought us around, didn't hide anything from us. And I had collected, every time he would do a lecture, because I'm getting his info, I'm making photocopies and repeating them in my lectures, right? Right. So, history piece, 1990, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. U.S., then you have the first Iraq war that happens as a result of that. Remember, that was 1990, 91. Mm-hmm. So Dad showed this picture of this magazine. It's Harper's Magazine, right? Harper's Magazine. And as you can see, you can maybe see these military paratroopers descending on an area that looks like some oil wells in the background. I know it's kind of hard to make out. Oil wells in the background. And it says, seizing Arab oil, the case for U.S. intervention in the Gulf, okay? And the Persian Gulf, right? And so he would say, what year do you think this, or what month do you think this is from? And people knowing the 1990-91 would say, maybe December 1990, January, March, April of 1991. You know what the date of this magazine? Harper, again, not some conspiracy. Harper's Magazine, March 1975.
Wow.
March 1970. Because the U.S., when did the U.S. involvement get into Israel? To the degree that it is now? 1967. What happened in 1960? OPEC was created. Organization of the Alliance of Petroleum Producing Nations. It started from 5, it's large now. To the point where it literally it was Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Venezuela, I forget the other two off the top of my head, that cornered the world's oil market. Okay. The industrial behemoth that the United States is, remember, this country is young, right, in the history of European countries. The way it got to its global prominence was through the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was powered with fossil fuels. So you had coal being phased out. Coal wasn't enough. Oil, right? United States, just like I said, Israel can't exist without the United States. The United States doesn't have its global supremacy without access to oil, right? And so literally, in 1960, when OPEC gets formed, they're like, what are we going to do? So first it's like, well, let's buy them off. These are the playbooks, and we see it later in the Congo with the Mumba. Let's buy them off. Well, these cats are billionaires. They found like ridiculous amounts of oil. Like, later they got gold-plated 747. You can't buy them off. So what else do we have? We got weapons, right? But I can't justify, like I'm supposed to be the moral authority. How do I justify it? That's where Israel came in, right? That's why it's so dangerous. That's why even most members of the Black Congressional Caucus won't speak against Israel. Not because of any love for Jews and not for any love for Israel, but they protect what is the economic engine of this industrial giant, which is exactly the same thing when we transfer to the Congo, which is exactly the same thing because the Congo has the fuel for the economic engine of this new green economy that we're going to. It's never about dogma. It's never about ideology. They make you think that. So yes, in 1975, they thought they would have to use Israel as the point, and we're going to create this instability. Now we have a reason to go and wipe all of y'all out because we've created this hostility. Whereas Saddam Hussein, when that came around, Saddam Hussein actually met with Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of State for Clinton in 1990, and because there was a long-standing debate, border issue with Kuwait and Iraq, contested border, just like you have with Ukraine and Russia. And he sat down with the Secretary of State saying, basically, we're thinking about invading Kuwait. And Madeleine Albright says to him point blank, that's not a U.S. domestic issue, right? Saddam Hussein had always been the puppet of the U.S. government. Him and his brothers were put in power by a CIA-sponsored coup back in like in 1955. And that's a whole other thing. We talk about Iraq and Iran and all of that. But again, that was intentionally done to create a situation to now pump billions of dollars to the U.S. and make sure that American and UK companies had an eternal foothold, right?
Yeah.
In that region.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so dangerous. It's not because there's this Jewish cabal that's so powerful. It's because of the same thing. These powerful white Western nations that are always going to put their financial interest and financial hegemony above anything else.
Wow. Having said all that, let's just go right into Congo.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, just go right into that.
Yeah, and there's okay. All right, we certainly aren't going to be able to, in part 2, we may have to wrap back into the Congo before we get the other pieces as well. All right, so.
But just for folks who have no knowledge.
So no knowledge of this whatsoever. And again, we got to go back way before the Congo's independence in 1960. We've got to go back even before 1884, 1885, and the Berlin Conference, before 1870 with Leopold, right? We've got to go to really the 1400s, where you see this global European imperialistic push, not just around Europe, because let's be clear, right? Before there was white supremacy, there was imperialism and control. It was just amongst themselves, so they had to define it under different terms. Because of the stark difference of racial differences visually, right, and resource wealth of parts of the world, it became so much easier to be like, well, black and white, duh, black and or white and brown or whatever, as opposed to now I got to see what clan are you a part of, what this, that, whatever. So Europe, that same force that created white supremacy had been in existence and playing itself out in imperialism amongst the people of Europe that we all call white today for millennia.
That's important for people to understand that before color was a thing, white supremacy already existed.
And so what you have is now that you have this European imperial force that's expanding around the world, throughout Africa, throughout the Americas. Well, okay, it's like we struck gold, right? And that gold being resources, but even more so human resources in the form of slaves, right? It's stealing our ancestors and enslaving them. The Portuguese were the largest enslavers, but you also had obviously the Spanish, the British, the French, and so on and so forth. And again, even then, because I tell people, while times change, people are not very different over time. We want to think that 100 years ago, 200 years ago, people were so different. No, even then, they knew we had to create this fake dogma of some ideological difference to justify the enslaving of people, right? So then it was through the Catholic Church and Christianity. Like we said, the reason why there are billions of Christians and Muslims around the world isn't because they found faith. They found faith at the end of a chain, a whip, or a gun, right? And so what you had was, and a perfect example is the next door neighbor to the Congo, Angola. One of our greatest heroes in the fight against slavery was Queen Nzinga, right? And I'm not sure I've heard both pronunciations, so I say them both. What you saw with her fight against the Portuguese in the late 1500s and early 1600s was saying, hey, listen, I'm a nation state, realizing that the Europeans created this under the Catholic Church, literally this thing called the doctrine of discovery, which was done in Africa, which was done horribly throughout the Americas, that said, if I come to an unchristian nation, they are not humans, basically. I can do whatever I want. That's certified by the Catholic Church. Now, of course, they didn't care about, they didn't care about no religion. They was greed, power, and control. So what Nzinga actually did was, one of the things that she did was, she ended up in this decades-long fight against the Portuguese, she ended up converting to Catholicism as a way to protect her people so that she would be recognized by the Catholic Church as a sovereign Catholic country. It was brilliant. It was a brilliant political move, because then by that, then she received the solidarity of the Catholic Church and so other Catholic nations in her war against the Portuguese. But again, so then now we start moving later. You start to have the outlaw of slavery, and more pushing deeper into the continent and seeing all these resources. Now, again, remember, at this time, there was no Congo. There were indigenous. There was the Songhai Empire, right? There was the Mali Empire. There were our indigenous nations that were there, right? Belgium, like so many others, come, and they happen in the area of Congo. And Leopold's like, okay, this is my even before the Berlin Conference, declared this his personal private backyard, right? You then have the Berlin Conference in 1884 and 85 that's formalized, and I want to be very clear, formalized the exploitation of African people and African continent. It didn't start then. It was going on for centuries before, but it formalized, and basically they said, listen, y'all, we, as the civilized European people of the world, we got to work together, because otherwise we're going to lose out, right? We've got to, and so they sat down over this 2 years and marked out, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours. And they assigned to Leopold the Congo, which was called the Congo Free State. Why? Because Congo was so rich. was so rich that they couldn't agree just for one European power to have it by itself, right? So they controlled, and there was a presence there, but other Europeans could travel through it in and out Congo, unlike these other areas that were French colonies or British colonies or Spanish colonies, you name it, right? And so then in 1908, finally, Leopold, it's transferred from his personal backyard to the Belgian state, right? And this is, again, like you say, the history is so tied together. What did he get at that point? He got reparations. He got reparations for handing over the land that he stole and brutalized so many people to the tune of today would be the equivalent of $1 billion. We see this in Haiti, the same thing, where the oppressor and the enslaver, what we talk about now for reparations, hands down has been paid to the enslaver, the occupier, the colonizer over and over and over and over and over again. And so you then, and again, looking at these connections, you had a whole host of people, we were talking about this earlier, of black folks in the U.S. that were fighting and spreading the word on behalf of what was going on in the Congo. Booker T. Washington, right, that is often portrayed as Uncle Tom back then, the white folks, was a member of the Congo Reform Association standing on before him. That's a history they will not tell us. Also, William Shepard, another powerful brother here in the U.S., was documenting, does this sound familiar? That the atrocities committed by the Belgian government. And so they would give their soldiers, for every bullet that they gave them, when they came back from slaughtering these folks, they said, listen, we're going to do a bullet inventory. You either show us the bullets that you still have, or if 10 bullets are missing, you have to show us 10 severed heads or limbs to show that you used that bullet. Not just to show, oh yeah, I killed him. You have to show proof. What does this go back to? What Dad talked to us about all the time, about the slaughter of the indigenous American people by the U.S. government, the bounties that were put on indigenous American people, where literally that either parts of their scalp or their heads were brought back, severed heads of our Native American brothers and sisters, brought back as proof to collect the bounty of that generation. Again, the white supremacy colonializer handbook is all the same. It's the same playbook. And so what you see then is now we're moving from human resources to natural resources. What's Congo? I mean, Congo, there's so much there. So rubber. I went to high school with two sons of the Goodyear family. Goodyear, Michelin, Bridgestone. These are companies and families that have made their wealth on the blood of our ancestors, okay? Not just those that were stolen, because they say that just about 40-50% of all enslaved Africans had some Congolese lineage there. But also when you look at the exploitation of the rubber industry that went on. Then that switches, we also think of with chocolate, and then where we are today with the minerals. We hear a lot about coltan, but in addition to coltan, which plays a huge role and is a necessary component with pretty much every electronic device, particularly our handheld electronic devices, we also have cobalt, copper, cobalt. The reason that copper, cobalt is so important, just like lithium is important, is because these are required components for batteries. So when we talk about moving to this green economy with electric cars and electric power, this, that, whatever, the battery is the powerhouse of that piece. So now there is no other part of the world that is as rich minerally in those areas. So leading up to 1960 and the Congolese independence, again, playing in the white supremacy handbook, you have this brilliant Patrice Lumumba.
Yes.
Now, Patrice Lumumba was raised as part of it, I forget the term that they use, but basically the petite bourgeoisie, right? He was raised, there was this class of Congolese that the Belgians were saying, we want to craft in the image of what a perfect Belgian is. Because again, remember, they realize colonialism's coming to an end. They know they're going to have to shift out. So it's like, just like we see with neo-colonialism, we leave, but we leave our lackeys behind. So, he was raised in that way. But then, and again, it's a lot of giving very much cliff notes. 1958, he attends the Pan-African Congress in Accra, Ghana. Now, prior to that, we've had Pan-African Congress where you had future African leaders that were in school in Europe that are then meeting there as students and coming together and putting these pieces together, right? But now you have Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's independent, what, 1957, 1958, 1957, I believe, who's now like, we are the beacons of Pan-Africanism, the idea of the United States of Africa. Lumumba goes there and boom, right? So no longer this petty bourgeoisie holding up in this path, Africa for the Africans, the United States of Africa, and what was then Leopoldville, which gets changed to, I think, Kinshasa, according to Nkrumah, was to be the capital of the United States of Africa, right? And so he comes into power as a man of the people, talking about fully ridding Africa of all of its colonial shackles, right? So what is it like? We got to get that brother out of there. Yeah. So immediately, and this is the first and the largest documented case of the CIA intervention in a foreign country, not just in Africa, but the largest at that point to date then in the world, and it was the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And what do? Of course, they go through it's those sellouts. In this case, it was a general, Mobutu Sese Seko, right? And who then went on, and it wasn't immediate after, because Lumumba was elected in like July 1960, immediately comes under fire because it's like all these folks are coming at him, right, from the European forces. By 1961, by the spring of 1961, he was assassinated. Mobutu works up, ultimately he becomes the president and had an over 30-year dictatorship, which was one of the most brutal dictatorships on the entire continent. Now check this out, because again, he was a CIA agent and always doing the bidding. Anytime you're doing the bidding against your people, you're going to be a public enemy of your people. In 1989, when George Bush was the president, this is a policy, you see that even before that, from Nixon to Reagan to George Bush, all of those decades, Mobutu was always front and center at the White House. In 1989, George Bush has him as the first official African head of state to have a state visit. And in the Rose Garden, he said, "We welcome President Mobutu, who is our greatest friend and ally on the continent." At the very same time, Nelson Mandela and the African continent, the African National Congress, were listed as one of the 5 top terrorist organizations in all of the world. So we know what that is. I had a personal experience when, in 1997, after being in South Africa for a month, I then went to Belgium. And it was so I'd been to Europe before, but it was so eye-opening because it was the first time I had gone directly from the continent to a colonizer, right? And of course, I knew the history of the textbook piece of it. And I'll say this, Bruges, Belgium, a city in Belgium, maybe about an hour or so outside of Brussels, one of the most beautiful cities that I ever have seen in my life. But I couldn't enjoy it because everywhere I'm looking, I see directly what that beauty, what that wealth, what that natural, the organic beauty, the financial wealth of it, the chocolates, the Belgium, was literally built upon the backs of our people, right? Having just been in this area of the world and still seeing the remnants of settler colonialism there. So when we see what's going on in the Congo today, and I know we're kind of jumping over a couple of decades piece, but from Mobutu, when Mobutu finally was pushed out at $5 billion of looted Congolese money there, not only do you have the next government that's sure, because again, it doesn't matter, like for them, for these imperial powers, yes, they have their agents, but they know ultimately their agents are going to be replaced at some point because people don't tolerate oppression forever. What they then do is they are then, whoever wins next, they're coming there, right? So even though Israel was a staunch supporter of the apartheid regime and the staunch supporter of the oppression and of exploitation of African people across the continent, they're heavy, trying to buy their way into every country, including South Africa, right? Just like that's what the U.S. does in that regard, right? So, when we look at the history of the Congo after Mobutu, when he was out, It's one piece after another of proxy government, of creating incredible instability in that region over and over and over and over and over again. So at the end of the day, you're not looking at the common enemy, right? And it is important for folks to know, and I'm glad that people are bringing it to the forefront, because if the world could see what is happening in the Congo the way that we now are seeing what's been happening in Palestine, I mean, as you know, rape as a weapon of war doesn't even begin to define the horrible mutilation and annihilation of our women of what's going on in the Congo. The mass murders. And
millions, we're talking about millions of people murdered and millions displaced. And just going back to King Leopold, for the 20 years that he technically, quote unquote, owned the Congo, over 10 million Congolese were slaughtered in a period of like maybe 20 something years. And you think about, is that like 400,000 people being wiped out every year? Half of their population was taken out.
And something that's important for us to realize, and it's the same way in the Americas, right? Those countries where you see the greatest brutality, Belgium, Portugal, right? A part of that was either because they were poorer in the imperial scheme compared to France or England, right? Or they had less on the continent. So, you know, England and France were all over the continent.
Right.
But so they had more that's like, because again, the natural resource wealth of Western Europe doesn't even, you know, register on the map compared to the Congo alone, let alone the entire continent, right? So it's like, hey, okay, great. Like, hey, I got more. I'm not that pressed about this one piece.
Right.
But when that's all I have, I'm going to be overly oppressive. And that's what we saw play out, just like we saw here in the Caribbean. Those smaller colonizing nations were some of the most brutal enslavers in the Western Hemisphere.
Dr. John Henry Clark said, Africa has always had what the world wants and what the world does not want to pay for. And you think about, you know, speaking about specifically Congo, probably the most mineral-rich country in the world, how the ways in which you talked about the divide and conquer, the destabilization. So then at some point when it looks like Black people who are killing Black people, it's no longer King Leopold killing millions of people. Now it's Black people killing Black people. It can be difficult for us to see, but it goes back to the conversation on internalized oppression here in this country or wherever it exists, that you're going to get the people to do the dirty work of those at the top. And so that's why sometimes it can be, you know, I heard people say, well, that's it's different in Congo because that's Black people now killing Black people, when we don't understand the powers that be and the destabilization. And I mean, America has always been on the wrong side of history. America has always funded and propped up the dictators. Mm-hmm. Like, how can we not see that alone? If we just look at how America has shown up in history, like they've never, Patrice Lumumba, as bad and as brilliant and as powerful and as for the people as that brother was, that they had to take him out. You know, I mean, it just speaks to what this thing is really about. So let us not be fooled by what's happening now in Congo in terms of the ways in which people are dying and who's actually doing the killing, because the people who are really doing the killing aren't the ones with the guns or the bombs. And so in their hands, you know, so that, I know we don't have much time. We're already at like 2 hours, but we're going to have at least another, hopefully more sessions, but it's important that we talked about Congo because the ways in which like there's coming a time where we're going to have to be okay being uncomfortable, and so our cell phones, the cars, the airplanes, all of these machines that are powered by the minerals in Congo. These are things that we don't think about, you know, and meanwhile there's mines collapsing on whole children and whole groups of people who are just wiped out without a trace. You never knew their name, you never knew their story, you never knew their mother, their father, their children, and not to mention, like he said, the women who are being raped, and just the mayhem that was intentionally caused and the destabilization that was intentionally caused. We have an opportunity now to, in connecting the Palestine, Congo, and all these other things, because we recognize that the culprit is the same. And so how do we begin to say, okay, one, it's going to take us to be brave. Two, it's going to take us to be willing to be uncomfortable. It doesn't happen overnight. I'm thinking like you couldn't find somebody. I mean, his wife, Tiffany, would always joke about how much I would be ordering on Amazon. Like, what's she ordering on Amazon today? And literally since probably in the last 2 months, I have not, I'm not saying I'm not going to, but I have not even been able to fix myself to order anything off of Amazon, just thinking about, because, we do things knowing full well. We know the damage that these corporations have done and continue to do. But it's like, okay, we got to live. We live in this world of instant gratification, and, you just make a call and you can get something delivered in 2 hours. The beautiful thing is doing something different is not only good for the bringing down these multinational corporations that never cared about us, that have done so much dirt in our communities, but it's good for the planet, and it's good for our own lives. What does it look like to, if I'm not relying as much on these corporations that have wreaked havoc on our community? What does it look like? Well, what does it look like to be self-sustaining? What does it look like to grow our own food? What does it look like to begin to support the businesses that have, been wiped out or nearly wiped out because the Starbucks came into our neighborhood, the Walmart came into our neighborhood, and then the mom and pop stores, you don't hear about them no more. So when we can begin to say, hey, these corporations were never no good for us. And, when we look at the companies that we have been asked to by Palestinians and other activists, and said, hey, we're going to boycott 3 companies. There's many to boycott, obviously, and we could always use that as an excuse. Well, they all bad. They all, okay, we understand that. And we can be strategic, because these powers that be, quote unquote, they could care less about us. It's not about appealing to their moral consciousness. They care about money. They care about power, or what they perceive to be as power. So to be able to affect their bottom line means something. And so when we were asked, we're boycotting Starbucks, McDonald's, and Disney, 3 huge companies. In my mind, I was like, dang, how they gonna do that? The addiction we have to coffee, and not to say that Starbucks is the only entity, but Starbucks is everywhere. And I mean, the addiction to McDonald's French fries alone, that's like most kids' first word for fries, and it's McDonald's. And so it's just to see how big this thing is moving. I was just in a food court, and I heard a 6-year-old brother say to their 2-year-old sister, "No, we can't eat McDonald's. They're funding." I can't remember what he said, but they're killing children, or I can't remember how he said it. It was a very childlike way, but he was clear. That 6-year-old was like, "Nope, I'm good. We'll figure out something else." So understanding how all of these things connect is so very important. We talk about all of these issues that we see in the world. You take an issue like depression and the suicide rates. Many of these things are because of our separation from our humanity. So the truth of the matter is, the more that we lean into our humanity, the more that we care, because we're afraid of, if I feel it's going to bring me down, and I'm an empath and I don't want to feel too much. You are in control of gauging your own. I know this lighting is crazy now. We are in control of gauging what we let in. But the other thing is, we can do something. Okay, it's like, so you don't want to pay attention to the images. So you don't want to see the child who got their head cut off. You don't have to look at those images. You can still be impactful by doing what you know has existed, what you know is happening. You don't have to look at any of it. You can protect your energy. You can do your prayers and your meditations and your affirmations and spend more time on the solution. You don't have to spend as much time talking, like he talked about, tearing down as it is building, because when
right.
we build, it automatically takes care of everything else. So the shift that is happening right now, and I know we're coming in over 2 hours right now. We're at about 2 hours, 8 minutes, so we're going to bring it all around. The shift that is happening right now is such a powerful shift. Humpty Dumpty is falling down and will never be put back together again. And I'm calling that the imperialistic structures, capitalism, and white supremacy as we know it is falling. And we have to figure out how to slowly let go of our attachments to the system, because we've gotten so comfortable. And so, the ways in which we will allow ourselves not only to be brave, but to be uncomfortable, I think we're there now. We are at that moment where we get to return, return back to nature. We get to connect to the young people and listen to the babies and listen to what the grandmothers and grandfathers are saying in terms of the way, what the things that maybe they didn't pass on to us because they were so busy trying to get us the shiny stuff, but those real embedded lessons of just life and love and really, tapping into things that were real and the things that matter. Because if you look at children all over the world, they don't care about things. Not really. They really don't care about things. When you put things in front of them, they may care about them. But when them things is gone, they could care less. They just want to have fun. They want to laugh. They want to sing. They want to dance. They want to be seen. They want to know that they matter. And so let's just start slowly, I'm talking to myself, start scaling back those things that we don't need to really tap into the things that are good for humanity, good for the planet. Let's start caring about other people's business. And I don't mean in a gossipy way, but people talking about that ain't my business, that ain't my child. It's like, no, let's go back to grandma now. That I'm snatching that child up regardless. At this point, we can't be so afraid to die that we're not willing to live. Right. This brother right here, I don't care what's popping off somewhere. He gonna get involved, and he's not gonna be worrying about what could happen. He's going to be intelligent about it, but I'm saying he's never going to not get involved because, this is too dangerous of a situation. I don't know, that kid might have no, he's going to get involved with intelligence and being God-led.
And that's part of that gift of the inheritance that we received from Dad. Because clearly that's where that, this wasn't something that just came up on my own, and understanding too the privilege that's in that, right? The privilege to have been raised in the household that we were raised in, as I say so often, with that front seat to humanity. And that's the piece that we keep saying over and over and over again, the humanity, right? And as Ayanna was saying, all of these things are connected, not just from a political standpoint and struggle, but from a spiritual standpoint as well, right? By us unplugging, like the Congo, its role in fighting climate change and global warming, when we look at the size of the rainforest, that's the one thing, many people only know of the Congo from the whole gorillas in the mist and the rainforest, right? The size of the peat fields and the rainforest that are absorbing this carbon out of our environment. The other part of it is that when we unplug from these things, the phones and this, that, whatever, in protest, we're also decreasing our carbon footprint, right? And when you decrease your carbon footprint, I know from my own kids, the less you're on this, the more you're walking, the more you're talking, you're increasing your own livelihood. Exactly. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
Right? All connected.
So we have, when we were talking about, do we have any asks? Do we have any tangible takeaways that we want to leave people with? And the very first thing is, because we understand, we believe and truly know that it is the unseen world that controls the seen world, that it is the Creator, it is the Most High. It is a source and a force bigger than us, that lives within us and also beyond us, that is in full control of everything. And when we stay tapped into that, I believe that can also help us to to find peace in the midst of everything, to know that there is a greater power that is in control of all this.
That's right.
And so our first request and ask is that worldwide that we have a prayer for humanity. And we're asking folks to do this prayer at 12 noon, wherever they are in the world.
Every day.
Every day. The sun is at high noon. And it's funny, you may have mentioned the lighting shift in the last maybe the last 30 minutes. I was trying to pull the shades down because the sun was so glaring, and I was like, oh, I don't know if it's gonna be too bright. And then I thought to myself, why am I trying to keep the sun out? So I think it's so fitting that as we come to the close of this session, this conversation, that the sun is just blaring in. It's just so beautiful as it's hitting our faces, and I ain't got to worry about lighting and all that because this is real time, real happening. That nature, tuning into nature, take walks and just tap into the natural elements inside of you. So with that, a prayer every single day for humanity, and whatever that prayer looks like for you, just let it be something that you are committed to doing every day, or whatever days that you are willing to do it. And so we're, calling on ourselves to do that prayer too. We know that collective vibration, collective energy, we know that prayer works. We know that affirmations mean something, especially when there's collective energy. We see the ways in which collective energy has been used to destroy. So we're saying now let us really galvanize our power and say we can collectively pray for humanity. We can collectively acknowledge life in the living everywhere and just affirm. And that's another thing. So the prayer at 12 p.m., wherever you are in the world, and then affirmations. Affirmations are powerful, speaking what it is that we want to see in our lives, within ourselves, within our own elevation, within our own abundance, within our own communities and families, and then on the planet. God don't know nothing about these, or don't care nothing about these divisions, these man-made divisions of what a country is, a nation. It don't matter. But we are beings, and and the prayer for all beings, and not just human beings, but all beings that have life. And so the prayer at noon, speaking affirmation, speaking life into what it is that we want. And for those who are interested and are, it's for them, because I know it's not everything is for everybody, but attending these rallies and demonstrations, you're gonna see so much. For those who haven't, you're gonna learn so much. It's people from all over the world, from every background, every tradition.
And it's working, right? The shift that we're seeing in the U.S. language, the humanitarian pause that happened last week before, now again, just like with all these other atrocities, they didn't change who they are.
Right.
They're responding to pressure. So we can't think that we've won when we see progress, but understand it's part of a larger strategy. So yes, it's not just saying, hey, go out and let your voice be heard, but this is working.
It's working.
The United States, Israel, and their allies are looking at not just what us in the U.S., but around the world, what people are doing.
Absolutely. Making donations to organizations who are on the ground and doing the work to support the people of Palestine, to support the people of Congo, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to put on a post some of the organizations that I believe and know to be, that I've been told, because sometimes you don't know well, what organizations can you trust, or who can we donate to, and because somebody had said something like, oh, I always donate to the Red Cross. I was like, yeah, please don't do that. That's a whole other conversation. But in any case, there'll be I when you don't know something, you can cede to those who do know and who've been on the ground and who know. And so I've been given a list of organizations that I've been donating to. With Congo, there's Friends of Congo, a great organization, and I've been donating to them before I even heard about them. And the reason I even knew anything about what was happening in Congo, a brother on social media, he goes by the name of Shaka Bars or Shaka Zulu, and he's, on the ground doing the work in Congo, building orphanages, building schools, doing amazing work. And so donated to his, I think it's called iHeart, but I'll get that information for people who are interested in organizations who are working on behalf of the Congolese people, as well as the Palestinians, as well as, and obviously there's people who are commenting and chiming in. And so this is also going to be a learning opportunity for us, for you to, as you talk about other causes and other organizations that would be good to support on behalf of those causes. In terms of people to follow, because people are like, well, how do you, the information that I've been getting, I definitely spend a lot of time on the Palestinian journalist Motaz Azeza. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. And a Palestinian sister, Bisan Oda. Spending time on there, and I'll put the names. Linda Sarsour, of course, I mentioned her already, getting a lot of information from her, Palestinian American activist. Tamika Mallory, getting a lot of information. Oftentimes I go to Sean King's page, and Jewish Voices for Peace, the Palestinian Youth Movement. And then there's just brilliant people like Amanda Seals, who I go to her page all the time, because it's not just the information that she gets, because she's getting this information from those who are on the ground and those who are doing the work, and she's getting it out because she has a big platform, but also her brilliance and her ability to see through the cracks and read between the lines. Also, she's also a really good
And on
one.
the Palestinian Israel side, I would definitely add Norman Finkelstein. He's been an amazing scholarly voice that can explain the history and the ins and outs better than probably most that I've ever heard to this point.
Mm-hmm. Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
And then, not just specific to Palestine, but Democracy Now!, Pacifica, all of those entities where you're going to get the real deal. So one of the asks during, it was like the holiday after Black Friday came, and folks were like, don't buy anything for Black Friday or Cyber Monday. And obviously there's many people who didn't pay any attention to that, but there's many people who did. And then I remember there was a Congolese sister who was putting information out asking, can we not, obviously we know we're not going to stop using our cell phones, most of us aren't, but can we not buy any new cell phones right now? And so I was like, yeah, that's for those who are willing to some people may be ready to buy a new phone, and they're like, look, I can get a refurbished phone. I mean, there's so many ways to do better. Doesn't mean we have to completely stop what we're doing, but there's so many ways to do better. With the boycott, again, the focus was Starbucks, McDonald's, and Disney, but we know it's Coca-Cola, it's Nestle, KFC, all of these companies. The reality is that they're wreaking havoc on the planet and on Black and brown people all over the world. I can't even tell you about KFC in Jamaica, because I spent a lot of time in Jamaica. That's a whole other conversation. But I'm just saying that these, Coca-Cola, Nestle, when we took commercial exploitation of the third world class with Dr. Nkongo when we were at Howard together, all these same companies were coming up. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it doesn't have to be specific to Palestine if you don't want it to be. It can be whatever you want. But it's important. But for those who are saying, hey, I want to know, I want to make a dent. I want to make a dent for the Palestinians, for the Congolese people. There's an opportunity to do that. And so I'm saying following some of these people for some of the asks. Also, the political pressure, reaching out to our elected officials to demand that they stand for humanity, demand that they call for a ceasefire and an end to military aid to Israel. Sometimes that can feel overwhelming. There's things that help. There's lots of organizations that will kind of do the work for you. They can kind of put the text in place, and you just kind of fill in your information. You make sure you're in alignment with what's being said. There's an app called the 5 Calls app. You can, if you don't have it, just you can download it. 5 Calls app. And then once you download it, you can look, and it has all these different causes. And you can click on the one or the ones that resonate for you. And then once you put in your zip code, it'll connect you to your elected officials, and then you can move through the prompts and get it out. Because to me, it's like it's not going to hurt anything. We can do a number of things, and they're all showing to have had some effect. They're all showing to have had some effect. Like this, the boycotting is working. The fact that people are rising up, you hear the language is changing. People who have been saying, people who have been saying just indiscriminately, bomb them all, bomb the children, they're changing their language now because they're getting scared because they're like, oh shoot, we can't fool the children anymore. There's so many students at universities around the country and probably around the world that are doing walkouts, and the administrators trying to repress them. They're not having it, and so that's why when you're on to something. So just talk, keep having the conversations. Have tough conversations with yourself and with other people. Ask yourself, am I afraid because I think I'm going to lose money? Am I afraid because I think I'm going to lose my job? And what is that worth to me? What kind of job do I have? Or what environment am I in that I want to protect, that calling for a ceasefire is somehow going to get me to lose something? So those kinds of things, just lean into things that we're not even talking about. I mean, we're talking about the things that are on our minds, but there's so many other things that you can come up with that you will introduce to us to say, hey, have you thought about this? And that we can, collectively begin to do some of those things. So these are some of the things. Again, I know we've shared a lot. I will be sure to note again some of the people that I've been following that have been helpful, some of the organizations that we can donate to, and things like that. But that's pretty much there's so much more to share, but that's pretty much in a nutshell. We really just wanted to help everybody get this connection, and why at the end of the day, and we'll come right back to it, we are 2 children born, 2 out of 11 children born to 2 beautiful, incredible beings, one who is an ancestor and one who is not. Our father, the late great Dick Gregory, and our mother, Lillian Gregory, she is just an incredible soul. And so I just want to say that we stand on their shoulders, and we live this life, and certainly a life of privilege, and at the same time, there has been sacrifice. We have seen our father, we've seen him survive through assassination attempts, death threats. We've been on the other side of the phone calls when people said they were going to kill our father. We know our phone lines were tapped. We've seen and experienced a lot, even though we lived a very privileged life. And part of the privilege was to be able to see the humanity of our parents and how that affected us and people around them in real time. So just leaning back into our humanity, leaning back into, going back to the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was never about color, because when we was freeing us, we was freeing everybody else. So it really, you don't have to take on the characteristics of the oppressor. Matter of fact, that ain't the move, because we've always been above that. As African people, we are connected to the bloodline of the first mothers and fathers of creation and of human civilization. And so, we don't have to beg and scrape and try to do what has been done to us, because we've always existed on another frequency. So allowing us and our people and people all over the world to really understand, let's just tap back into the roots, to the roots of humanity. Let's tap back into, what did it look like when we were able to, not look over our shoulders and not, it's possible. We have an opportunity now as this entity that's coming down, kicking and screaming. We have an opportunity now to say, and now we get to truly live. My father said, this country has taught us how to make a living, but it didn't teach us how to live. But we're born knowing how to live. And so tap into what you naturally know, tap into what you naturally feel, tap into your first voice, your God voice, and just be be that light as we feel this light that's on our face right now. I don't think there's any mistake, in the timing of this moment, but just be the light, be the change you want to see in the world. And, as much as we're talking to you, we're talking to us. And we get to do this together. We get to grow together. We get to learn together. We get to transform this planet together and transform ourselves in the process.
That's right.
And that's it. We love y'all.
Look out for part 2.
Part 2.